Hi, everybody. It's great to see you here. I am Martha Seelman. I am the Executive Director of Studio Art Quilt Associates, and we are one of the 4 organizations who put together Textile Talks every week. I want to remind everybody that next week is American Thanksgiving, and so we will not be doing a Textile Talk, but we will be back the week after with a wonderful presentation from Surface Design Association. Studio Art Quilt Associates, SAQA, is a membership organization with around 4,300 members from around the world. We get together online and in person to share what we are making in art quilts, collecting, reading about, and we invite you to join us for our journal, our conferences, our webinars. If you go to saqa.com, you can join with a $20 off of a new membership using the discount code TALKS, because you heard about it on Textile Talks. So I hope that you will join us, because we'd love to have you be part of our art quilt community. I also want to let you know that this is the 175th Textile Talks recording that we are doing today. So that's a landmark. And thank you for being here and being part of this wonderful occasion. We are thrilled to be joined by Mary Savig, who is the Lloyd Herman Curator of Craft at the Smithsonian American Art Museum's Renwick Gallery, which is quite a title. She's coming up on her 4-year anniversary in this role as curator, where she is helping to manage their collection, researching, putting together exhibitions. She's going to be telling us about one of them today. Previously, she was at the Smithsonian's archive collection, and if you go on Amazon, you can see some of the fun books that she put together as she came across interesting items in the archives. My favorite one is discovering how many artists had cats as pets, and you can learn all about them in one of Mary's wonderful books about what the treasures in the Smithsonian Institution. But today, Mary is going to be talking about an exhibition that has been in the works for many, many years because of the pandemic. It's been postponed several times, but it will be launching soon. And we get a sneak peek at the artwork that will be in Subversive, Skilled, Sublime, Fiber Art by Women. So Mary, we're really looking forward to seeing what you're going to share with us today. If you have questions as you're watching, put them in the Q&A box or in the chat, and I will monitor them and then ask Mary your questions at the end of her presentation.
Right. Martha, can you just confirm that you can see my presentation mode and not my notes? I'm paranoid.
No,
It looks okay.
It looks great.
I'm always so paranoid about that. Hi, everybody. Oops. I need to move my. Sorry, this is okay. Wait. All right, I'll do this. So hi, everybody. Before I begin, I just really would like to thank Martha and Lucy for all of their support and creativity. There's always so much work that goes into making these programs possible, and I'm really grateful for the invitation. So this afternoon, I'm excited to share some background information and a sneak preview of our forthcoming exhibition, Subversive, Skilled, Sublime, Fiber Art by Women. This exhibition is the product of years of research with my co-curators, Virginia Mecklenburg and Laura Augustin, and in close collaboration with my former employer, the Smithsonian's Archives of American Art. I'm also really grateful to our exhibition design team, Sarah Gray, Megan O'Laughlin, and Nathaniel Phillips. For those of you who haven't been to the Renwick or our partner museum, the Smithsonian American Art Museum, I just wanted to point out that we're two separate buildings, but we are the same staff and we're the same collection. The Smithsonian American Art Museum focuses on the entire history of American art, and the Renwick Gallery is a smaller space in very close proximity to the White House that is the nation's craft museum. The Renwick opened in 1972 with a focus on American craft, and we have since acquired some really remarkable works by fiber superstars, including Lenore Tawney, Sheila Hicks, Kay Sekamachi, Joyce Scott, and the like. The Renwick's, our umbrella museum, the Smithsonian American Art Museum, also collects fiber-based works, especially in the areas of modern and contemporary art and self-taught and folk art. So for this exhibition, we wanted to bring together the diversity of works from across our collections together into one permanent collection show. So first, why fiber? Cotton, wool, sisal, polyester, silk, fiber, as we all know. I'm with the quilt audience. I'm very excited to be with my people. Fiber is felt in nearly every facet of our lives. Fiber carries experience. The ways in which these artworks are constructed, often line by line, thread by thread, stitch by stitch. These lines record and reflect their very means of production. As Faith Ringgold deftly observed, quote, a quilt, somebody's mother, somebody's grandmother made one, so they feel comfortable. It's warm, you know, you can feel the hand, you know something about the way it was done. Fiber has also been woven into tapestries, embroidered onto duvets, sewn by hand and machine into quilts, wall hangings, and also sculpted into ethereal structures. All of these artworks express movement and personality. They are soothing, subversive, sublime, and spectacular. So why women? Why are we focusing on women for this show? While many artworks created in the 20th century were made with fiber, the work of many women fiber artists has long been denigrated as, quote, not really art, and negatively associated with domestic spaces and the inconsequential, repetitive work of amateur artists. And yet, women fiber artists, and of course, all of the artists who are joining us today, have always experimented with conceptual and material techniques, making visible the politics of identity with the politics of the hand. With this in mind, the artworks in this exhibition piece together an alternative history of American art. These artists and others took up fiber to complicate the historic marginalization and revolutionize its import into contemporary art. Many of these women drew on personal experiences, particularly their vantage points as women, and intergenerational skills to transform humble threads into resonant and intricate artworks. To contextualize the different experiences from across the makers in our collection, we'll emphasize personal narratives throughout the exhibition. This means that we'll draw on oral history quotes, podcasts, and archival materials to deepen the experience of the artworks. Every label will have a portrait of the artists and the artists, and also quotes from the artists or their families. These primary sources bring intimate insight into the artist's life and bring clarity to the historical record. The exhibition layout is not organized in a linear or chronological order. Rather, it articulates the diversity and depth of fiber art throughout the United States. Such artworks cut across many different movements, such as the Bauhaus philosophy of Elsa Regensteiner and Sheila Hicks, the feminist and civil rights activism of Lamershi Frazier, or the boundary blurring quilts of Leah Cook. So here we're trying to invite connections across these different lines. Several themes in the exhibition will try to place artworks in conversation with the artist's own words. So the first gallery, when you walk into the Renwick, will be a bit of an introduction to fiber. I think we're beginning rather than ending with an exclamation point, a celebration of fiber, if you will, to upend art world hierarchies. So when you walk in, you'll see this work by Claire Zeisler. It's very tall, it's 83 inches tall. and it's just spectacular in person. The red is so vibrant. I'm sure because there have been 175 of these Zooms, you've heard often that I think out of all the materials, fiber just does not translate well to a virtual reading of it. So I do hope you can all just imagine with your own material experience, like how wonderful these textures and colors are in person. So Claire Zeisler appropriated off-loom knotting and wrapping techniques to create these voluminous structures. A celebration is a freestanding and free-flowing sculpture that declares fiber art is fine art. A lot of artists here are addressing this art world hierarchy. I will say it's not something I'm always interested in, but we are starting with it as a way to just show to some people that, to our visitors, that yes, all of these works are artwork, and we're not going into the hierarchy unless the artist does. The artwork is made from 136.5 balls of hemp and 40 skeins of jockey red yarn. It took her, she documented this in her archives, 597 hours for Zeisler and her assistants to meticulously wrap the threads around galvanized wire. In the 1940s, her practice began at the loom, where she made wall hangings inspired in part by the ancient textiles and baskets in her personal art collection. And then in the 1960s, like so many artists, she abandoned the loom, but not threads. Emma Amos also threaded fleeting moments of her everyday life as a Black woman into poignant artworks. Winning, shown here, is a snapshot of the moment a leaping woman becomes airborne. The exultant figure, made of a patchwork of woven swatches, threads, and ribbons, celebrates Amos's commitment to fiber, even as she gained widespread recognition for her paintings and prints. From 1961 to 1973, she worked for famed textile designer Dorothy Levy's, and then in the 1970s, she taught weaving at Threadbare Unlimited in Greenwich Village and at the Newark School of Fine and Industrial Arts. Amos even produced a Boston Public Television program called Show of Hands about crafts. With this in mind, Winning is more than just a moment. It indicates Amos's deliberate leap to elevate women's work into her work. As we transition into the next gallery, we'll explore the sublime and dynamic, dreamy works by artists like Lenore Tawney, Cynthia Shira, Olga de Amaral, and a few others. Such sublime works are all about threads and structure. Lenore Tawney created in the dark forest at a crucial transition in her career. In 1957, she moved from Chicago, where she trained as a weaver, to New York City to embrace life as an artist. Her loom became a means to shape new dimensions of fiber art. In the dark forest represents Tawney's open warp technique. She pulls fiber through the vertical threads by hand to create painterly gestural forms. Here, Tawney achieved the transcendental effect of sunlight filtering through a shadowy forest. So this is actually two different weavings that are kind of placed back to back. So you'll actually be able to see through this. It looks like it's one-dimensional right now, but there are two different warp structures here. These these early weavings seeded Tawney's lifelong experimentation with light, scale, and volume, which eventually reached the sky in her Cloud series. Box of Falling Stars represents the culmination of Lenore Tawney's journey to give shape to light. The work is an example of her Clouds, a series of ethereal sculptures conceived in 1977. Tawney called the Clouds vertical weavings in volume, and weavings without weaving because they were not made on a loom. First, she drew a grid on the canvas support, and the canvas is the top part that's white. At every intersection, she pulled through a single linen thread through the canvas and secured it with a knot. She repeated this simple task thousands of times. The tedious process yields this really beautiful cosmic effect, and we'll have this fully in the round in the gallery so you can walk through it. The fall of the shimmering threads emulates the ways in which clouds and stars hold and diffract light. Box of Falling Stars heightens perception and mindfulness to the elements of life that often go unseen. And this is one of my favorite works. I love that she still calls it a weaving because there is actually the She does pull the vertical thread through the single horizontal thread. So according to her, this is still a weaving, which I love. So then as a juxtaposition to Tawny's verticality in this gallery, we'll see Cynthia Shira's Reflections. This is a monumental work of 4 different panels. The ethereal surface is created by the added wefts and even weft and twined wefts that are very textural here. The delicate sheen of the subtly dyed first layer conjures a misty horizon, suggesting also the flatness of the artist's Kansas environment. Shira fuses the essence of a landscape within the structure of her fiber works, affecting the overall perception of the work. So some of these works are really exemplary of the idea of sublime, and also some of the like overarching themes of the fiber arts movement in the United States. Continuing the thread, the next gallery will take you to a small section on the sublime and skillful play of surface, of pattern and structure. Judith Scott used fiber to carry her voice. She developed a sophisticated process of weaving, tucking, and binding colorful threads around found items, making sculptures that spoke about feelings she could not otherwise convey. Scott was born with Down syndrome, institutionalized at 7, and belatedly diagnosed as deaf. For much of her life, she was presumed incapable of language. In 1985, amid shifting attitudes about people with disabilities, Judith's twin sister, Joyce, brought her to live at her house. She enrolled Judith at the Creative Growth Art Center in Oakland, California, a community program that fosters creative expression for people with disabilities. When she discovered fiber, Scott dedicated herself to wrapping, concealing, containing, and transforming objects, seemingly reflecting her isolation and then her new life and path to art. And we'll have 2 works by Judith Scott from our self-taught and folk art collection on view. Nearby, we're very excited to hang this tapestry rug by acclaimed weaver Agueda Martinez. She wove traditions, ideals, and her own spirit into rugs that are contemporary in design. Here we have concentric diamonds, hourglasses, and chevrons echoing Chimayo designs of her Mexican-American community. Martinez and her husband, also a weaver, initially depended on subsistence farming to provide for their 10 children. To augment their income, they gathered plants for dye and spun scraps of worn clothing into yarns to make rugs. Today, she is considered a New Mexico artistic treasure. This won many awards. There's a great documentary. So as you kind of maybe can tell, we're transitioning into a space about home and family life. The works on view explore complex, often contradictory influences of domesticity, motherhood, and femininity, where fiber art is often most familiar. Doilies, bedspreads, clothing, and adornment have long been associated, for better or worse, with women makers. Louise Nez, a renowned Dene matriarch, weaves scenes inspired by her own life and culture. A hogan is at the center of this, an octagonal structure on the right, representing the traditional home and ceremonial space of Navajo families. And the center, a covered wagon drawn by 2 horses, seems to have just arrived. Women below spin and card and hand spin wool and weave geometric rugs at the loom, while sheep mill about the scene and other animals. Although less widely known than the geometric pattern textiles often associated with Navajo weaving, these pictorials have been a creative tradition for generations of Dene weavers. As a child, I feel like I've been holding out on the quilts, but we have a lot. As a child, Clementine Hunter moved to Melrose Plantation in Louisiana with her family to work as sharecroppers. She worked at first as a field hand and later a cook and a housekeeper. When the owner of the Melrose died, his wife made the plantation a retreat for visiting artists, and Hunter's exposure to artists and some leftover paints led to the beginning of her artistic career. Her quilts, like her paintings, illustrate quotidian stories she felt historians had overlooked, primarily the activities of Black workers in the South. So Melrose quilt depicts several notable buildings at the plantation, including the Big House, the Yucca House, and the African House. Several works by Marguerite Zorak are the earliest works in this exhibition. This exhibition does focus on the 20th century. We kind of put some parameters around it. So it starts at the very beginning of women using fiber art in the 20th century to about the early 2000s, because I think there's a shift happening in fiber at that time and got a little complicated. So I'm happy to talk about that. But for this exhibition, we're kind of keeping it in the 20th century to contain it. So in the exhibition, we'll have a bedspread and then this embroidered portrait of her childhood home in Fresno, California. Marguerite Zorak was an American modernist, and she began experimenting with embroidery upon returning from her travels abroad as a young artist. Influenced by the avant-garde artists she met in Paris and their exploration of color, she found paint's colors to be tired and dull. Wool, in contrast, was a new world of brilliant colors. So she called her embroidered works paintings in wool. They were beautiful and practical. Following the birth of her 2 children, Zorak embroidered to adapt to the realities of juggling, running her household, and her work as an artist. This is a very familiar story for many women artists. Marguerite's husband, William Zorak, was a famous modernist painter. And if you look on the archives, almost all of the newspaper articles about both of them, they were both very successful, would start out as like William Zorak and wife. It was always like she was always the wife and hardly ever was named in these articles, especially in the headlines. Her vibrant vignettes often incorporated personal imagery. So this is a portrait of her childhood home. And you can see the reclining nude figure at the bottom in the hammock. That's also a repeating figure in a lot of her modernist paintings and fiber works. Of course, we have Miriam Shapiro. This is a monumental work. It's huge. It actually only fits on one wall in the exhibition, so it'll be in a very specific spot. We hardly ever get this on view because of its scale, and it says, "Welcome to our home." So Miriam Shapiro here is welcoming and then subverting historical women's work. This monumental artwork welcomes us all to the wonderland of home. In the center, the embroidered image of a modest housewife graciously welcomes the viewer to her home amidst a collage of quilt blocks, aprons, and cutouts of teacups gathered by the artist on a trip to Australia. The work celebrates frivolous, sentimental women's work. As Shapiro emphasized, people forget that the origin of the word sentiment also gives rise to sentience and sensibility. And those are all words about feeling. So if you take the sentimentality away from women, you're taking their feelings away. And you can't do that to women. You can't take our feelings away. This is a quote. The work is subversive in its scale and content. The grand size claims museum space, not domestic space, showing that women's work indeed belongs on our walls. Likewise, Catherine Westphal assembled this patchwork quilt from snippets of fabric painted with designs she created for the commercial textile industry. This quilt is actually one of the first fiber works acquired by the Renwick when it opened in 1972. Westphal, who described herself as a free spirit, spent 8 years designing fabrics for the apparel industry and taught for over a decade at the University of California, Davis. In the late 1950s, she began making quilts and was soon transferring images from her own photographs and mass media sources to fabric. I mean, every technique she did. The image is a riff on the American artist Edward Moran's patriotic painting of the Statue of Liberty. This is the 1886 dedication of the Statue of Liberty, in which the statue towers over a harbor crowded with boats and American flags. Westphal's Lady Liberty, I know you can't see her in this picture because it's so small, but she seems appalled as she gazes at the chaos below. A comment perhaps on the meaning of liberty at the height of the civil rights movement. Carolyn Mazlumi taught herself to quilt in the 1980s. Her quilts often narrate the strength of family in its many expressions. The family embraces, celebrates African ancestors as conduits between Earth and the cosmos. Mazlumi emulated the look of a linoleum block print with the technique of reverse applique, cutting the designs in the top layer and allowing the bottom layer to show through. As Mazlumi sewed her own story quilts, she also tirelessly expanded the universe of African American quilt making, In 1985, she founded the Women of Color Quilters Network to convene and support thousands of fiber artists, and I'll talk more about that at the end. And Faith Ringgold learned to quilt and sew from her mother and sometimes collaborator. Her story quilts, performances, and installations blend elements of history and culture to create parables about contemporary life. This is one of our most requested quilts, so we're very excited to have it on view. This is the Bitter Nest Part 2, the Harlem Dinner Party. For those of you who are in the New York area, all of the entire series of the Bitter Nest was recently on view at the new museum, so I hope you were able to see that. Art Quilt is the second episode in a 6-part narrative that traces the life of an imaginary family in which Ringgold serves as both narrator and alter ego. This painted quilt presents Cece. She's an artist, a free spirit, and she's dancing at a dinner party for Harlem Renaissance luminaries, thrown by her husband, a distinguished dentist. Her straight-laced daughter, Celia, seated to Cece's left, is mortified by her mother's colorful clothing and unconventional behavior. The side panels detail the story of the family dynamic. And in the exhibition, we are actually going to have these panels available, so you don't have to lean in and look at them. We're going to put them at a larger text scale, and also you'll be able to find them online because they can be hard to read in person. And the 6th and final episode of the story of this generational conflict and mismatched expectations, the family does reunite, affirming the beauty of Cece's independence and creativity. With these works, we're showing the entanglements of material knowledge and social histories. In fiber arts, they often inform the other. One informs the other. Lamershi Fraser documents history and recovers memory. In her art and in poetry, she provides answers to the dual questions: whose voices are not being heard, whose stories have been erased. In From a Birmingham Jail, which is titled after one of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s most famous writings, Fraser chronicles episodes in the life of Dr. King, emulating the format of an African strip quilt. Clips from the memorial issue of Jet magazine, intermingled with symbols and images of Central and West African masks, celebrate King and, in her words, King as an activist, peacemaker, and tireless leader of humanity. So like the Ringgold quilt, we are going to have panels so you can see some of these Jet magazine articles at a larger scale so you can actually read them. And I think we did find on eBay a copy of this Jet magazine, so we are hoping to have that available in a little reading area. And here is a baby quilt. The central figure in Virgen de los Caminos is the Virgin Mary. Her face is represented as a skull, and she is bordered by flowers and crisscrossed by embroidered barbed wire. This is like very invisible for you to see, but you can imagine like very delicate stitches are barbed wire. And also Consuelo Jimenez Underwood, the artist here, has sewn the outline of a running family more than 24 times across the surface. Again, this is not something we're going to be able to see unless you're seeing it in person, and then it really reveals itself to you. And the running family is shown at the right. This is from her archives from a newspaper article about these signs. These are huge caution signs that alert motorists to migrant families traveling on foot along the San Diego Freeway, leading north from the United States-Mexico border. The sign shows a running father, a mother, and a little girl. Underwood made this as a baby quilt, as a memorial to all the little girls who perished trying to cross the freeway to safety. And here is where we start to round back to home, twining together the experiences of the subversive, skilled, and sublime together. Sheila Hicks, this is one of our major works. This is The Principal Wife Goes On, and it's one of the artist's earliest modular ponytail works. Elements here can be adapted or removed for the work to evolve and adapt to its environment. So this will again be seen in full scale. So these are pieces that are all individual and they hang from a bar at the center. And often we've exhibited this up against a back wall. But for this exhibition, we're able to make it in the round, so you'll be able to move around this. This work was featured in the Nationally Traveling Objects USA show, and I'll just read from that because I think it's the best characterization. It says, quote, "It can be said that she is limited only by thread, but what she is able to do seems limitless. Her work is deeply rooted in searching for a sound and rational structure that will enable poetic liberties. So this is like the push and pull of a lot of these works, is like women are often told that, thread in many ways does marginalize historically, but it's also been used as this immense tool of material of liberation. Likewise, Kei Sekamachi weaves to her own intuitive cadence. The hanging sculptures of Sekamachi especially challenge our perception and very understanding of fiber. These works are technically intricate and conceptually rich, with nods to nature and identity and abstraction. Inspired by the structured elegance of calligraphy, origami, and lacework, Sekamachi created hanging sculptures with a multi-layered weaving technique. She situated her work at the vanguard of the fiber arts movement by dressing her loom with monofilament or fishing wire. The space-age material allowed her to shape each woven layer by hand to create the natural effect of a rippling stream. Nagare is the Japanese word for flow or river. That's the title. In the 1980s, Bay Area artist Leah Cook simulated historical women's work like drapery, crochet, and quilting. Here, Cook was inspired by her great-grandmother's crazy quilt. Cook explained, "I remember her talking about the different fabrics within it, like my grandfather's top hat, so I decided to create these imitation crazy quilts." In the 19th century, women stitched together assorted patterns and textures into elaborate asymmetrical blankets. Cook painted the appearance of patterned fabric with strokes of acrylic paint onto woven abaca paper. She then pieced together the swatches into a flashy quilt weaving painting. The process reveals Cook's wily feminist politics. She flattened and spliced together traditional domestic techniques with expressionist painting, demanding that all be appreciated from the same perspectives. And finally, a work that really needs to be seen in person for full effect. This is a really large work, a landscape by Adela Akers, who grew up by the sea in Havana, Cuba. She developed this interactive woven structure to set into motion the choreography of color, light, and shadow across a seascape over time. When By the Sea is viewed from the right, the gray glow of morning light radiates across the deep turquoise water and the mountain peaks of a distant island. When viewed from the left, an evening sky absorbs much of the light except the faint glow of the headland and its reflection on the inky sea's surface. As you walk from one end to the other, only the purple horizon line remains constant. Each of the 32 panels was individually woven in Akers' signature dense style. This is a really rigid sisal warp and tightly pulled wool wefts and sewn together into this accordion form. So to really emphasize the labor and the creativity of these artists, particularly their inevitable comparison to women's work, we've created archival cases to bring more insight into their processes. These artists do not simply toil away, hunched over with knitting needles in hand. They study, sketch, explore materials, and often experiment with materials other than fiber. So we have some of Sekamachi's research on different monofilaments. Material exploration is especially exaggerated in Lenore Tawney's mail art, which she would find inextricable from her hanging works. From simple sketches and poetic lines, we see the beginnings of artworks and their conceptual frameworks. This exhibition shows the many ways in which women took up fiber for its historical and creative possibilities, recalibrating our perception of a material taken for granted in our everyday lives. So as I mentioned, this exhibition has been in the works for several years, and the checklist has changed very little. In the meantime, we've expanded our collection in really exciting new directions. I'm excited to share with you all the news that we have recently acquired 35 quilts from the collection of Dr. Carolyn Maslumi. Just going to quickly review them. In an oral history interview with the Archives of American Art, Dr. Maslumi stated, "Sometimes the weight of living on this planet as a woman, we have to be reminded of who we are. Quilts help to serve that purpose of reminding women about their power. So I'd like you to hold her words with you as I highlight the power of these quilts and their makers. The selection is remarkable in its scope and groundbreaking in its representation of Black history and culture, as told with needle and thread. I wish I could slow down and share the backstory on each quilt, but right now I'm just gonna share some major themes like family and community shown here. Again, the details are just amazing in person. There's several quilts about social rights, social justice, and civil rights. This really extraordinary work by Carolyn Crump. A lot of quilts about making history. So this is a lot about African American first, like the first Oscar winner, the first Paul Robeson, the first man to play a Black man to play Othello on Broadway, the Tuskegee Airmen. And then finally, I just wanted to preview some other things coming up at the museum in the near future to look out for. Next spring, over at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, we are opening an exhibition of the Amish quilt collection of Faith and Stephen Brown. So look out for that. I've seen some of these quilts in person and they are just extraordinary. And that comes with a catalog with essays written by our curator, Leslie Umberger. And I've been working on an exhibition on state fairs. Oh, and Janikin Smucker, sorry, who also wrote for the catalog. And then for 2025, 2026, I have been working and I've been talking with Martha about this for several years on an exhibition about state fairs. And this will preview all of the kinds of crafts made at fairs from the 1840s to the present. And as you might imagine, quilts have a huge role. They are like the mainstay of almost every fair. And they were often the first crafts that were included in competitions at fairs. So here's just a few of the quilts that we're looking at for this exhibition. And they range from something I just saw in New Mexico a few weeks ago to the center is Grace Snyder's flower basket work that is extraordinary. It has 87,000 hand-pieced and hand-sewn together triangles. It's like a quilt history treasure. And then on the right is this really lovely story of this 4-H teenager in Wisconsin who made this broken star quilt for the 1931 state fair. And she actually got 4th place and she was really disappointed because the judges said her colors were too bright. And in person, this is a really lovely quilt. So we're excited to include it with probably 150 other works for this huge show. So that's what we have happening coming up. So please let me know if you're ever in DC and you can stop by the Renwick. We always have quilts on view and I'm always happy to talk with you more about them. Thank you so much.
Mary, could you quickly just back up to the Amish quilt? I have a request from Susan Levering who wanted to look at it again. It's a really unusual color palette compared to how we usually think of Amish quilts. Always strongly saturated color, but not some pink and purple is one that I haven't seen before, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know a lot about Amish quilts, but I think these ones are just, they tend to have very vivid colors. The exhibition title is Pattern and Paradox. So it is sort of about these unexpected qualities of Amish quilts that this exhibition and catalog are drawing out. So I think the scholarship on this is also going to be really wonderful.
Thank you. And then if you now stop your PowerPoint sharing, I have a bunch of questions for you. The first question, there we go. The first question is just the logistics. What are the dates of the show? Will there be a catalog and will you be doing virtual tours?
Well, okay. So the show has been postponed a few times because of some construction delays, not at the Renwick, at our other building, but because of how the construction delays affect our registrars and conservators, it does affect what's happening at our building. So now I think the exhibition will probably open around September of next year.
Oh, okay. Because the website is saying May, but you're saying no, don't believe that.
I think don't book your tickets. I think that will be updated soon because we're just getting word for some schedule shifts that are unfortunate, but it also actually a lot of these works, especially the ones from our folk art and self-taught collections that are much older, we got this wonderful grant to do a lot of conservation work on them. And a lot of this work is going to happen at the Renwick in the months leading up to the exhibition. So we're hoping to be able to document some of that and share that out, because normally our conservation takes place in storage, so it's not as exciting. So yeah, don't come next spring, come in September, and it should definitely be on view then, because we cannot postpone it any further.
All right. Then I have a couple questions. One is more theoretical. A lot of those early fiber artists referred to the work they were doing as paintings, so that it would be associated with high art. But increasingly, artists working in fiber are focusing more on the materials. And the person writing the question was saying, can you talk a little bit about how you see things having changed and the language being used?
I know. I think I share this interest, and whenever I feel a little suspicious whenever I hear someone saying that they're painting with fiber or using threads to make fiber. I think that there's something there that is this bias that is saying somehow fiber has to be elevated. And so when you make the comparison to painting, you're doing that. I don't think that needs to happen, but I think historically that has been a mechanism for someone like Marguerite Zorak, who was trained as a painter, to be taken seriously as a fiber artist. She had to say, using these threads is even better than painting. It's better than the colors are better. And that's her way of saying to a very male dominated audience that this is just as good. That did go away. I do think in the fiber arts movement, you often hear people like Claire Zeisler and Lenore Tawney, they're talking about threads themselves are the essence of the work, and the process is the work, the means is the work, and that's also the conceptual part. So that does change. I still do see it though. I still see a lot of connections, and this tends to be put on by people who maybe just don't know fiber and these histories very well, who continue to kind of make these I think unhelpful connections to painting sometimes, because I think these almost always stand on their own and don't need to be compared to painting.
Yeah. The follow-up question was that you said that this exhibition is restricted to 20th century works because you see the works that have been made since then as being in some ways different. So everybody
A
wants
little
to know.
different. Yeah, I know. I knew that. I knew that would cause some questions.
Yeah.
So it doesn't end like the cutoff is not 2000. I think the latest work is by a bead artist, wonderful artist Joyce Scott, whose work I didn't show. I should have. I think that's like 2013 or so. I think that's the latest art. But a lot of our more contemporary works I think they require a slightly different contextualization, because I think we're kind of looking at like the beginning of what leads to the fiber arts movement and just like the conversations around fiber in American culture that I think changes like around 2001. And this is just my personal opinion. I think with like the rise of things like Etsy and Ravelry and YouTube, I think access to fiber becomes so different that the work changes. I think the work that the Renwick collected after this time is often very different, and not in a bad way or anything. It's like in a really exciting way because it just shows how diverse fiber can be. So it does change. And also those works are often usually like recent acquisitions, and because of they're so new. And for this show, we really wanted to bring out some of our greatest hits that are not shown a lot because of light exposure. Like we just can't bring out the Sheila Hicks very much. We actually have a great Ani Albers, but we can't even bring it out for this show because it just needs a couple more years of rest. So yeah, a lot of it is also just to do with like the display. And it's also something we thought about with including things like basketry. We just had to make a decision to like put some bounds around it. And hopefully in the
Sure.
future, we can return to that.
Mhm. So one of the things that I noted as you were going through the works that you were showcasing is that almost all of them are monumental in scale. Do you think that that's a reflection of when they were made, or a reflection more of what the museum prefers to show so that they have a really big presence in the physical space?
Yeah, some of them are huge, and they definitely they are sort of creating these moments of just like splendor when you're walking through, and that they are um from their time. This is when weaving really became three-dimensional, it became sculptural, and that's when they're from. We do have a lot of small works. So the Navajo weavings are very small in comparison. We also have a necklace and a sculpture by Joyce Scott that's a little bit smaller.
Those are
It's much
small,
more
yeah.
intimate. We have a work by a woman named Alice Ligon who embroidered while she was hospitalized, and it's a smaller wearable work. So we do have a lot of different moments of intimacy. The Sekamachi, and then another work that's similar to it by Adela Akers are also smaller. They're more lighter. So they're in a separate space too that allows them to, I
Mhm,
think, really be able to see just how intricate they are.
mhm. Somebody asked whether the exhibition will travel, or are the works too fragile to be able to travel?
I know, a bunch of museums have reached out wanting it to travel, but we just can't. We can't let most of these go on the road. Our our window for being open is about as long as it can be before our conservator starts saying, "No way, it can't be exposed anymore."
Mhm. And will
So
you
you'll
have
have to come and see them.
are you going to do a catalog?
No, there's no catalog with this. We did work with the Archives of American Art. Um, there's a website that we built out with them that helps deepen a lot of these works with the archival research that goes into it. And so you'll see there like more of the sketchbooks, the mock-ups, like the material exploration. And then
Mhm.
we also produced a podcast that hasn't been out yet, but there are about 7 episodes of a podcast that draw on the oral history interviews from the Archives of American Art. So again, we're just trying to reinforce that it's like this exhibition is about the artist's own words. So everything is framed from their vantage point. So we have the podcast as a way to just directly share their stories.
Mhm. Well, that sounds exciting. Please do let me know when that's ready to go live, and then we'll put the word out,
Thank
because
you.
that would be fascinating. And I was interested that part of what you're showing are some sketchbooks and sampling, and just artists,
Mhm.
evidence of how artists work. And I was wondering if some of that emphasis is in part because you used to work in the archives. And so for you, that's part of the fun of being a curator.
Yeah, that's where I started, and that's actually where I was at the Archives of American Art writing my dissertation on fiber histories. And Virginia, who's the curator at the American Art Museum, told me she was trying to cook up a fiber show from the permanent collection. And I just thought, well, the angle we have that hasn't been approached before is this archival lens that
Right.
gives you so much more insight into the process, and then also just their personal lives. So early on, we kind of like decided to work together, and then I moved over to the Renwick, and just to tell you how long this has been going on. But yeah, and I think that really remains a very special part. That's something that only the Smithsonian can do, is be able to put these resources together.
Together, yeah. And that leads me to another somewhat technical question. One of our people in the audience was curious about some of the captioning where it mentioned that some of the items were gifts from a collection and some were purchases and some were both. And so
Mhm.
she was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how does the Renwick acquire the pieces that are in their collection?
Right. Yeah. Well, we acquire through all of those routes. We do have, along with the American Art Museum, an acquisition budget. So we are able to just make direct purchases from galleries or directly from the artist or from collectors. That's a process that's often vetted by our commissioners and, of course, our director.
Mhm.
And we also receive donations. So we respond to people offering work. And that's also part of a research process where we have to learn more about it, have that vetted. And then there's a combination. And sometimes it's groups of people come together. We have a lot of really wonderful supportive donors, and they sometimes come together to help us acquire work. And so there's all these wonderful means of collecting work.
Mhm. Yeah, well, it looks like it's going to be a fantastic exhibition in September. I hope that a lot of our audience will be able to get to Washington, D.C. to see it in person. Will you be doing a virtual tour on the website, or will it just be a couple still shots?
Um, it'll probably be the still shots. I do think we are still working on some programs. There will definitely be some virtual programs. I think we want to do a couple virtual interviews with artists. And so maybe we can talk with you about sharing
Oh,
those
great.
resources. And then there are always tours. So if SAQA wants to come out and get a tour, I'd be happy to give it to y'all.
Wonderful. Oh, that's an offer. It's hard to refuse. That would be fantastic.
You all just have to let me know if you've won blue ribbon.
In the
Any blue
state
ribbons for
fairs.
state
Yes.
fairs?
Yes, everybody out there, Mary is looking for blue ribbon winners in any fiber category at a state fair. So if that's you, please contact Mary because she's still working on the state fair exhibition. Mary, thank you so much. This has been really fascinating and I can't wait to see it in person. And everybody else, remember that next week, when it's American Thanksgiving, we will not be doing a textile talk because all of our staff will be planning their turkey dinners. But we will be back the following week with a really fun program from Surface Design Association. If you are interested in supporting the Textile Talk program, we are looking for donations to help support it. Textile Talks altogether costs about $50,000, and we need your help in making it possible to bring you this kind of wonderful programming every week. I hope you have a wonderful day. And Mary, thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you all.